Welcome back to Mark Haney, igniting the entrepreneurial revolution with the Haney Biz Project.
Well, welcome back to the Haney Biz Project, brought to you courtesy of Hub International. I'm Mark Haney, and today I have the privilege of being joined by Dr. Kristie Bobolis. She is with Sutter Hospital, and she is a breast cancer expert. How you doing, Kristie?
Doing great. Thanks for asking me today.
I appreciate you coming down on the show. You are one of those people that I think likes to stay in the background a little bit or focused on your patients. But we want to get to know you today, so we're going to try to bring out your story, the story of a doctor who helps save lives. And really, I mean, does so much more than that, because there's a lot more than just the patient, I assume. But
yes.
I want to know what got you into this. Let's find out a little bit about what inspired you to take on this huge role.
Well, I definitely reflect on that sometimes. I think it was probably when I was in high school. My aunt developed breast cancer. It was my dad's sister. And she was relatively young, not quite as young as Carol was, but it was probably the impact that had not just on my aunt and everything she had to go through, but the entire family. My grandmother, her mother, my dad, her children. And to this day, really how this sort of impacts the dynamic of the family.
Did your aunt survive?
She did not. She did not. She was probably in her late 50s when she died of the disease.
Wow. And so you saw that firsthand and said to yourself, what?
Somehow that experience made me think, boy, I want to understand this disease better. And I also wanted to see if there was a way you could help people through this experience a little more smoothly than what I experienced or watched or observed watching my aunt go through this.
Yeah. Now you grew up here in Sacramento. Tell us about you.
Okay.
You grew up in Sacramento. You went to, I assume, the local high schools here, and then what happened in your career?
So I'm actually born in Salt Lake City.
Okay.
But moved to Sacramento in 1963. Yep, I went to high school at Hiram Johnson. My dad taught high school at Sac High.
Wow.
And we've been members of the community at our church since the 60s. My dad, to this day, in his 90s, even sometimes directs the church choir. My mom was the organist. I have two sisters. I mean, we have a lot of family in Sacramento. But not many people know this, but I first went through dental hygiene school at Sac City.
Okay.
And
you were actually maybe at that point even thinking about being in the dental side of the medical profession. Okay.
And then I thought, okay, I am 20. I need to go back and finish my bachelor's degree. I went to UC Davis. I loved my science classes. I loved physiology. I loved, believe it or not, biochem. I loved all the biological sciences, and decided, I don't think I want to be a dentist. I think I want to go to medical school. That was about the time I reflected on my aunt's experience and thought I wanted to bring something to medicine based on my personal experience and family's experience.
So you graduate from med school, and talk to us about when you first started at Sutter.
So I started at Sutter, let me think about this, probably in 1999. And initially, like most oncologists, took care of every subtype of cancer, leukemias, etc. But somewhere around that time, really became focused on taking care of patients with breast cancer. And at our institution, helped organize really how we provide care for patients. We have a breast team, essentially. We have a multidisciplinary conference that meets once a week. I mean, we really try to put a team around each patient, because this diagnosis is sort of a team sport. I mean, you have to see a radiologist, you need a biopsy, a pathologist is involved, a surgeon, sometimes a plastic surgeon, a medical oncologist, a radiation oncologist. It is a team.
Wow.
So we really try to put together a team approach for patients.
And let's talk about, I guess there's no typical example for breast cancer, I would assume, but 1 in 8 women will sometime in their life get breast cancer. Does that sound about right?
I know that sounds shocking, but breast cancer is a very common disease. And it's not a new disease. I mean, it's been around since the history of man. Breast cancer's been around, but we do a better job detecting it and we have better treatments. Survival is better. So it's really come a long way.
And just thinking early on, walking myself through the patient experience, I know that awareness is, and keeping track, staying in touch with your own body is such a critical piece. But I'm thinking to myself, when you first realize that something's different, what's the first step that you guys recommend? Just go to the doctor?
Yeah, I think it's reasonable to go to your physician and express your concerns and see what you need to do about your concerns.
And then when they get to you, obviously there's been some testing, and then it's like, wow, you have cancer. Is that when they come to you, or is it slightly before that?
Well, typically, by the time they come to me, they have a diagnosis of breast cancer, and they're there for me to help them discuss their medical options for treatment.
And what kind of options typically would we see?
So typically the types of treatments one would offer for breast cancer might be chemotherapy after surgery, or a hormone blocker, or in Carol's case, sometimes a patient may opt not to do treatment or may have such a good prognosis, treatment's not indicated.
Okay.
But primarily what I do is take women through chemotherapy and or a hormone blocker. And even when they're done with treatment, continue to follow them to help them through the after effects of therapy, help them transition back into what's a normal life for them again, and follow them beyond that, so that at one point their care is more about health maintenance than risk of relapse.
Mm-hmm. And Carol talked about it taking like 5 years before she really felt she was out of the woods. How many people actually die of this disease and don't quite have the success that Carol's had?
Well, unfortunately, we do still lose women to breast cancer. And I'd say most of the women in my practice are like Carol. They're thriving, doing well, and are expected to survive. But of the more than 200,000 women that are diagnosed every year with breast cancer, about 40,000 still succumb.
Wow. We talked about how difficult it was as we were talking to Carol, and what kinds of despair typically happen. Hers didn't sound as, she didn't describe it as horrifically as I know that it can be. Where does the doctor-patient relationship take itself when things are really, really difficult?
That's a tough question.
How close can you get to your patients?
Well, you have to be present, and you cannot help but feel and have empathy for people. But what they expect from you is to give them guidance and to give them strength and to help them through this experience and not take it on to such a personal level that you are, in despair yourself. And it's hard sometimes.
How often do you see a patient and they feel alone, right? I know in Carol's case, she talked about her support system being so strong, and I know some of the cases of my friends, they have this incredible support system. How often do you see somebody who's all alone?
It happens. I think that it's even the case where some people surrounded by a huge support group feel very isolated, because the experience can be isolating. Going through chemotherapy, finishing chemotherapy, hair is growing back, people look at you and think you look fine, you're great, it's behind you. Whereas that person may not feel like it's behind them at all. They may not have the energy they're used to having. They just may have a little trouble assimilating back into their old life, their prior life, their relationship with their spouse, their children, their coworkers. And it's an isolating experience because they may look okay on the outside, but they might be experiencing fatigue or neuropathy, some side effects of the chemo, or a change in their hormone levels. So now they're in menopause, even though they're in their early 40s. And so it can be a very isolating experience.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about that experience and a little bit more about what the rest of us can do as we consider these horrific diseases. And, with it now being Breast Cancer Awareness Month, I think this is the time to be thinking about, what we all can do as a community to help combat this terrible disease. When I return, we will be rejoined by Carol Garcia, And of course, Dr. Kristie Bobolis will stick around, join the revolution at haneybiz.com, courtesy of the Entrepreneurs Organization of Sacramento and law firm Greenberg Traurig. This is the Haney Biz Project.